Just when you thought 2020 couldn't be any more bizarre, he comes along. Now from the man cave in Mountain View, California, it's Nick Pinkerton with the Twisted Wrister Podcast. Hey there, Twisters. Welcome back to another Twistcast. I'm coming at you from Mountain View, California here on Sunday, July 19th, 2020. So a few things that we're going to be covering today. Of course, I'll be just kind of updating folks on what's been happening over the last week. We'll be talking a little bit about which teams I'm kind of cheering for with these upcoming playoffs because my Sharks are long out of it. I'll even talk a little bit about my impressions going into the play-in rounds. I haven't really thought about those matchups a whole lot, but I thought I'd give some kind of raw projections, if you will. We'll talk a little bit about some of the best hockey games I've ever been to. And then we'll talk a little bit about what I would do or how I would feel if my team finally won a Stanley Cup. So anyway, let's get into it in just a moment. But first, if you're new to this podcast, if you're new to this channel, definitely click the red subscribe button down below. And if you're listening from SoundCloud, head over to my YouTube channel. It's Twisted Wrister Hockey, and it'd be awesome to have you along. So here we go. In the last week or so, this is actually pretty cool. So earlier this past week, I recorded a video with Neil from Post to Post. So he brought me on to talk about jersey concepts. No surprise there. He's been doing that with Audie James and with Kale from Vesper Hockey. So it was awesome to get the call from him. And he said, yeah, would you want to come on and talk about jersey concepts? And it's amazing because, he's a big reason why I started my channel in the first place. And I'm sure that other YouTubers can say that. And so it was cool because I'd never actually spoken to him. We've exchanged messages on Twitter and whatnot. But yeah, it was kind of surreal. But Neil was super chill. He was ready to rock and roll and talk concepts. And we had a pretty fun time with that. So I'm really looking forward to that video. He'll be probably putting that out, I would imagine, in the next week or so. But he's a busy man. I know that for sure. These videos that he makes, some of them are, over half an hour long. He and we talked for 55 minutes. Or that's how long our recording was. A little interesting in that you have to kind of figure out when it's your turn to sort of step in, especially when you're giving reactions because, somebody might start to say something and then you're like, whoa, what's that? And so it's a little challenging, but nonetheless, I think that we did a pretty smooth job between the two of us. So that'll be not really my debut on Post to Post, but it'll be the first time in which I've been featured in a recording. I know that I did guess the jersey with him, but that was more so for my channel. But yeah, I'm really excited for that. So that's something that I'm definitely looking forward to in the very near future. I've also been working on the channel's logo. Yeah, so some of you out there on Twitter and Instagram have been keeping up with my developments with that. It was about a year and a half ago where I thought to myself, hey, maybe I should come up with a logo for this channel. But I was lazy and inconsistent, or when I would put in some time to actually work on that, I'd be like, hey, this is good. I like where this is going. And then I'd leave things alone for a few months. And so this time I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to sit down. I'm going to work with a designer. I'm going to, work with somebody who's created some good logos in the past. And we're going to hammer this out. I had a concept that I worked on, I think it was in April or May. And I was pretty happy with that. And that was through multiple sketches and sort of ideas that I kind of, messed around with in Photoshop and sketching and whatnot. So I finally got something that I'm excited about. And so we're just about ready to finalize this logo. And so you'll be seeing that in channel branding. You'll be seeing that, on my social media banners. You'll see that eventually on merchandise. So not too much I want to talk about with respects to that just yet. But for the hardcore twisters out there, I definitely want to give you an opportunity to eventually, get a branded t-shirt, get some stickers, a beer mug maybe, and hopefully one day your very own Twisted Wrister Hockey jersey. So stay tuned, my friends. I also just acquired a jersey that I'm so excited to unbox on this channel. It's kind of one of the holy grails out there. It's kind of like every jersey collector, someone who wants to get a jersey for every team or whatever, they got to have this one in their collection. It's not a Sharks jersey, I'll say that. But in a couple of weeks from now, you'll get to see me unbox it. I paid a little less than I would have expected, so that's good. And it was really surprising because there really weren't that many bids. There were like 2 other bids for it. And I kind of came in, in the last minute and was like, okay, what if I raised you a little bit? Usually when you're shopping on eBay and you get down to the final minutes and you're like, okay, it's my turn to finally bid. Then you put your bid in and all of a sudden you're like, wait a second. Okay, I need to go higher because somebody set their maximum bid probably like $10 higher. So then you keep going. You're like, wait, what? How are all my bids, being rejected here? So sometimes people will say, yeah, I'll pay $80 for that, but they set their maximum bid at like 130 or something like that. So I was a little concerned I'd be at that point as well. But fortunately, I don't know if I'll ever get a jersey as rare with as little resistance. So I'm excited about it. It's in pretty good condition too. It's one that fits me. So I'm going to be, putting together an unboxing for that. Again, probably about 2 weeks from now. So looking forward to it, definitely. I also recorded a segment recently on why I think the Minnesota Wild could win the Stanley Cup this year. I'm doing this for every playoff team, but I kind of resumed post-quarantine production on that series, or during quarantine production on that series with the Minnesota Wild. And let's go ahead and play a little clip from that. Reason number 2, discipline. So the Wild had averaged 8.06 penalty minutes this season, which was, I think, pretty middle of the pack. But the thing is that they had the 25th ranked penalty kill. So how can this team actually overcome that in the postseason? Well, I think it's possible. Because under Evison, that number went down to 6.58. So a minute and a half fewer penalties per game. And the team's PK during this stretch, 31 of 34, which is almost 92%. So that makes a huge difference. That's 15 percentage points bigger. So that will definitely come in handy when you're going up against Vancouver, who had the 4th ranked power play. We'll see what happens beyond that, if so be it. But yeah, if you're going up against other teams in the round following that, you've got Vegas, you've got St. Louis. They were also in the top 9 in the league's power plays. So staying disciplined will definitely be key. And that will help the team, reinforce its defensive strategies there. So there you go. It was a bit of a stretch talking about Minnesota. They're not the sexiest team out there. But nonetheless, I mean, in the playoffs, any team can win it, right? LA Kings in 2012, right? The Edmonton Oilers went to Game 7 as an 8th seed in 2006. So, with the playoffs, don't count your team out of it. And speaking of the playoffs, we're going to be talking about that quite a bit now. So somebody was like, all right, why don't you share a little bit about who you're cheering for in the playoffs now that your Sharks are out of it. And my second favorite team is the Buffalo Sabres. So that doesn't exactly bode too well for me either. So let's go through each of these playoff teams and I'll kind of give you sort of my overall impressions of how I would feel if that team won. So I'll start with the 8 teams that were the top 4 seeds in their conference. So 4 in the West, 4 in the East here. Start in the West. So what if the Blues repeated? I wouldn't be like super ecstatic by any means. I was really happy when they won last year because before that season started, I actually predicted them. But nonetheless, I like the players on the Blues for the most part. Big fan of Pietrangelo. Parayko's a great defenseman. Ryan O'Reilly, of course. So it wouldn't be the best, but I don't really care too much. But yeah, if you're a Blues fan and your team wins, hey, good on you, right? Colorado Avalanche. Well. So I've always kind of liked the Avalanche, or for the most part. I used to root for them during the Patrick Waugh years, And I certainly like the team a lot. Nathan McKinnon's one of the most exciting players out there. And so I would be happy if they won. I'm not going to be like actively rooting for them necessarily, but I'd say that they're probably like, if I had to assign them where they fall in the 24 teams, I'd say they'd be like 5th or 6th. So I certainly like watching them play overall. So why not get to see them have a deep run? So yeah. Dallas Stars. Well, historically, I'm not a Stars fan by any means. So in the late 90s and in the aughts, for the most part, the Stars and the Sharks had a pretty fierce rivalry because the Stars were in the Pacific Division. So I did not like them whatsoever. And as someone who doesn't like the Dallas Cowboys and doesn't really care about the other Dallas teams, like I just by default don't like the Stars that much. But now, I mean, that hatred or that animosity has certainly worn off. And of course, they have Joe Pavelski on their team. So it's kind of one of those things where I probably won't be rooting for them. I'll be definitely cheering for Pavelski. So it's kind of one of those things where if I don't really like who they're going up against so much, then I'm going to definitely be cheering for them. And again, like Pavelski's the big reason behind that. If they win a cup, I mean, I'm like, all right, that's cool. They haven't won one in 21 years, so why not? Why not? It's cool with me. Next team is Vegas, and I'm sure a lot of you already know what I think there, being a Sharks fan. So I'll spin it. I'll put some spin on it. I'll be happy for the subscribers out there because everyone's cool. I don't know. Would it be worse if the Knights won the Stanley Cup in this situation? Oh, yeah, I guess so. I mean, Peter DeBoer is their head coach right now. But the thing is that they're not going to win a Stanley Cup. DeBoer can get them to the finals, but he's DeBoer, so they're not going to win the finals. All right, let's go to the East. I'm going to start with the Lightning. Kind of like the Stars or the Blues. I'm not a huge Tampa supporter. I certainly like their players. Don't get me wrong. Kucherov is again one of the more exciting players out there, but Tampa, they're kind of one of the favorites. They've been a perennial favorite for most of the last 5 years, right? So I don't really care too much. I mean, I'll probably be rooting for underdog teams that they're playing against, but I don't have anything I don't have anything against them. So it's kind of one of those things where if they go up against like Vegas in the finals, or if they go up against Boston in the conference finals, those are definitely situations in which I'll actively root for Tampa. Plus, I've been to Amalie Arena and I had a really fun time. So, thinking about my experience there, what would it be like for the fans of that city to win a Stanley Cup again? Yeah, that's pretty cool. Which brings me to Boston. I'm not a Bruins fan. It's mostly because I'm just tired of Boston winning championships for everything, even though I thank the Red Sox for beating the Dodgers a couple of years ago. It's just that, yeah, they're pretty much perennial contenders. They're favorites this year. They won the President's Trophy. It's like I got really no need to cheer for them, even if I like David Pastrnak. I'm not obviously not going to be a Brad Marchand fan. I'm not a Chara fan, even though it would be pretty amazing if he won the cup and then decided to retire. I would like to see something like that, of course. But Chara's got a cup. No love lost there. Washington Capitals. So kind of like the Avalanche, I do actively like the Capitals. They have a couple of my favorite players who are not on my Sharks. TJ Oshie, Ovechkin, Kuznetsov, and former Shark Brendan Dillon. So even though it's kind of like a bandwagon team for me, sort of, I do see myself rooting for Washington, for Brendan Dillon specifically. But I wouldn't complain, if OV or Oshie got another cup. I mean, that would be absolutely terrific. So I'll probably, definitely support them in many cases. But there are a couple other teams who, even in the East, that I would probably want to back just as much, if not more. Philadelphia. So I'm not a Flyers fan necessarily, but before this season started, I predicted the Flyers to win the Stanley Cup. I also, if I recall correctly, predicted Alain Vigneault to win the Jack Adams. So it's not shaping up too badly for me now, is it? So I'm kind of secretly rooting for Philly, even though I'm not much of a Flyers fan. I mean, I would have nothing against them winning at all, even if I didn't predict that they would win this year, because, they've gone 45 years without a Stanley Cup. So get on with it. Let them have one already. Let's look at some of the other teams in the Eastern Conference. So New York Rangers. So I could see myself getting behind the Rangers because I love Panarin, and I really admire the work that they've done over the past couple of seasons, retooling, rebuilding their roster, being very, very transparent with the fan base. Obviously, the opportunity to see Lundqvist win a Stanley Cup, even if he's backing up, that's still very special there. You don't want a player like that to go a full career without a cup. So I don't really see why I wouldn't cheer for the Rangers in certain situations. I mean, it's interesting because in their first matchup, they're playing the Hurricanes. I also like the Hurricanes. I kind of wanted to get on board with them just before they, got good again, before the storm surge and everything there. And so I still like them, definitely. I'm a big fan of Slavins. I've said for the past couple of years that he was maybe the best shutdown defenseman. So the numbers definitely back that up. And now he's actually, receiving that acclaim that he has earned for sure. So I still want to support Carolina. So in this series against the Rangers, I don't really care one way or another. It'd be kind of cool to see the Rangers win that just because, they weren't even expected to be here this year in the playoffs. So I don't know. I'll be happy either way there. And I'll probably root for that team to win their next round as well. Let's jump over to the Florida Panthers. So I would say that of the 2 or 3 teams that I'm cheering for in these playoffs, Florida's one of them. I've been pulling for them for the last couple of years because I've always been a big fan of their forward core. And it's not because of Barkov so much. It's because of Huberdeau and Dadonov. And I know that they have a couple other players in the sort of middle 6 as well who aren't talked about quite as much. If Sergei Bobrovsky shows up like he has in his Vezina seasons, then it could be really fun watching him backstop the Panthers to a deep run. But he hasn't quite gotten there this year, not so much. So I'm not sure if they're going to go all the way or anything like that. But I'll definitely be cheering for them. And besides, that fan base needs something to cheer about. They haven't won a playoff series in almost a quarter century. So Florida is definitely one of the teams out there. Besides, come on, who wouldn't want to see those beautiful jerseys trotted out there for a few rounds, right? New York Islanders. Now, I've never been an Isles fan. I never hated them, but I've never been a fan of theirs particularly. That said, for Barry Trotz, absolutely. I've always been a Barry Trotz fan ever since he was in Nashville. So it's kind of one of those things where maybe I'll root for him, considering the Caps I don't know how the hell they didn't re-sign him after the Stanley Cup. So I'm rooting for him. In that series against the Panthers, I'll go for the Panthers, but if the Isles win, depending on the next matchup, I don't know, maybe I'll cheer for them. But I wouldn't have any problem with them winning the Stanley Cup either. They're going on 37 years since their last cup. So, for all the Isles fans out there, and there's some good ones on YouTube, of course. Yeah, why not? All right, Montreal Canadiens, last team to win a cup for Canada. I've never been a Canadiens fan so much, but again, I'm pretty indifferent when it comes to them. You think of Shea Weber getting a cup, that sounds pretty cool. Obviously, a Canadian team winning is great. There are other teams in Canada I would rather see win first, but nonetheless, it's fine. I would say that maybe they're around of the teams of who I want to see win the Stanley Cup, they're probably further down the list, but that's not to say that I'll be upset if they win. Pittsburgh, now the animosity for Pittsburgh's kind of worn off a little bit since 2016. The run that they made this year is really impressive considering pretty much everybody was injured at some point. It would kind of be one thing where if they went into the playoffs as decimated as they were during the regular season, maybe I'd actually kind of get behind that. But now that they're somewhat healed up, now I'm just well, it's Pittsburgh. Who wants to see Pittsburgh win again, right? The only reason why I would want Pittsburgh to win is, let's say they played Vegas in the finals. Then I would be full hardcore Pittsburgh because Patrick Marleau is on their team. I mean, I do want to see Patty win a cup, but I'm not I would rather see another former Shark win on their team than Patty win one on Pittsburgh for the most part. So sorry, Pens fans. Let's see, Blue Jackets. Yeah, I'll get behind the Jackets. The Fighting Tortorellas, really. I'm not a Columbus fan so much, but small market. Haven't, with the exception of last year, they've never won a playoff round, so they've only won one technically. Sure, I'll get behind them. Although I gotta say, even though they're going up against the Leafs, and the Leafs are a little bit of a a laughing stock when it comes to playoffs in recent memory, I'll still be kind of pulling for them just because I've always liked Toronto. Living in the States, you don't get the sense that Toronto is the New York Yankees of the NHL. I mean, yeah, sure, they are maybe to the Canadian market or to the main markets, but you don't really feel that here on the West Coast. So I'll go for the Leafs in that series against Columbus, but either way, I'll be happy with whoever wins. But I mean, I would like to, I want to see the Leafs win a cup. Why can't it be this year? So I will cheer for them. I'm sure at some point I'll definitely get behind them. One of my good friends who lived below me, actually, he lives in town still, but he's a Leafs fan for life. He's from Toronto, so it'd be fun to kind of cheer them on with him. All right, and as for the other 8 teams in the Western Conference, so Chicago, we're 5 years removed from the last Stanley Cup of theirs. So it's kind of one of those things where now they're not even expected to do anything. I actually predicted them to go to the playoffs this year, but of course not under these circumstances. So they're going up against Edmonton in the first round. I won't be mad if Chicago wins, but I can think of other teams that I'd rather see win. So, not so much for Chicago, but I won't be that heated. Edmonton, I actually kind of want to see Edmonton do it, just because I'd like to be able to see McDavid throughout the playoffs. If I had to wait 4 months without hockey, when hockey comes back, I'd better see some good hockey. So if McDavid is around for that, that kind of makes it worth it for me. So that's really the only reason why I'd want Edmonton. Winnipeg Jets. Sure, I'll certainly support a Canadian team in the playoffs here. They weren't even supposed to be in this position in the first place, so I think the prospect of rooting for them, it looks pretty good. There's not like one player who I really want to see win a Stanley Cup on that team so much, but for the small market of Winnipeg, for those fans, that's pretty cool. So they're going up against the Flames in the first round. I'm fine with Calgary as well, so all the Western Canadian teams are okay in my books. The Flames actually predicted to go to the Stanley Cup Finals this year, so I am going to secretly be sort of rooting for them. But in that series, maybe I'll prefer the Jets, but Calgary, if they win, I'll probably want them to win another round or two after that. Plus, they haven't won a cup since 1989, so that's kind of they're kind of due for one. All right, Arizona Coyotes, I'd say that they're kind of third on the list of teams that I want to win the cup. You got to cheer for the small market out there. I'm overall a fan of what John Chayka has done with this team over the last 3 or 4 years. I really like their goaltending, of course. And besides, they'd wear those Kachina jerseys, so you can't go wrong with that, right? So Arizona's kind of a team that I'll definitely be on the lookout for and supporting because, they haven't won a playoff series in, I think, 8 years, so they're due for one. They're going up against Nashville, and Nashville, for me, I love going to games there, or at least I've been to one and had a very nice time. But, they've kind of had their chance in the spotlight. Granted, if Pekka Rinne came back and actually was the Pekka Rinne of old, I'd probably get behind Nashville a little bit. They, had to really put together a strong run just to get back into contention and whatnot. So I do respect that. I won't be rooting for them, but I won't be pissed if they win. Vancouver Canucks. So they're just getting back into the playoff fold here. So there are some teams like that who I wouldn't necessarily be cheering for. Certainly like Jacob Markstrom, and I think he's capable of backstopping that team to a cup. And obviously you want to watch their first line out there and watch Quinn Hughes. But I don't know. I'm cheering for some of those interior teams in Canada before Vancouver. As for Minnesota, that's probably the other team that I'm rooting for, with Florida and with Arizona. So with the Wild, the Twin Cities haven't won a championship across the 4 major sports since 1991, the Minnesota Twins. So Minnesota sports fans, their hearts are crushed almost perennially by the Vikings, the Twins. They've had some really good years kind of come out of nowhere in some of them, but they just come to a grinding halt in the playoffs because they always have to meet the Yankees. So, they need something to be stoked about. And, obviously some bad stuff's happened in the Twin Cities, so I'm really hoping that Minnesota can make a deep run, kind of like they did in 2003. I was definitely behind them back then, and I'll be behind them this year too. All right, so while other YouTubers are doing a fantastic job of putting out series previews, I'm not really doing that on my end, but I can use this podcast as a way to kind of give some projections and impressions going into each of these play-in rounds here. So I'll kind of break these down, let you know what I think, and give you my sort of projected outcome, my prediction, if you will. So we're going to start with, this is just the first one I saw on the schedule, Rangers and Hurricanes. So in this, I like the Hurricanes more. I know the Rangers have the 5th ranked offense, but Carolina has such a good defensive core. Brett Pesce and Jacob Slavin are two of the mainstays there. Goaltending wise, I think that you look at what Mrazek did in the playoffs last year. I think that, he's capable of probably repeating that, he's healthy now. I think that their scoring depth is capable of matching that of New York. Their top line's production could maybe even go toe-to-toe with, Panarin and Zibanejad. So I still think Carolina is the stronger team. They're just a year removed away from a deep run. So I think they have the edge in this series, so I would pick them. Blackhawks and Oilers. Now, with the Blackhawks, they don't have Robin Lehner anymore, and Corey Crawford has been MIA, or at least the last time I checked. Of course, you have the experience of Kane, Taves, Seabrook, and Keith. But if I have to compare the coaching matchup with Jeremy Colleton versus Dave Tippett, yeah, I know it's been a long time since Dave Tippett was in the playoffs, but he has the pedigree, man. He has the success primarily with Dallas, so I like Edmonton just based on that. Edmonton, they don't put up a lot of points from the defense, but I think they could win this game in a defensive battle because I think that their defensive depth is actually underrated. You know, Darnell Nurse and Oscar Klefbom, even Adam Larson. I mean, he's a fine defender. You know, he's not going to wow you offensively. Goaltending wise, I think Edmonton can, at least hold their own, regardless of who's in net. Even Mike Smith, you look at the run that he had last year with Calgary or in that first round, he's the only reason why that the games were competitive or respectable. So I don't know if Edmonton's going to be able to ride goaltending past that, but I think they can get the best of the Blackhawks. If Kyler Yamamoto shows up like he did this season, I think the Edmonton Oilers win this in 5 games. They might even sweep. I think that they've been consistently a good team this whole year, so I'll take the Oilers. Panthers and Islanders. So this is 2 different teams. You have the Panthers, who have a forward core, a top 9 that can pretty much score at will. And then you have the Islanders, who are more defensive minded. And, really, when you look at it, I might have to give the edge to the Islanders here. It's Quenneville against Trotz, 2 Hall of Fame coaches. But I will usually side with the team that has better defense and better discipline out there. Sergei Bobrovsky's just been way too inconsistent this year. The Islanders, they have a little bit of toughness as well, from guys like a Ross Johnstone, Cal Clutterbuck, Casey Cizikas, who I think is a pretty underrated player. I think those players can get under Florida's skin. I'm going to take the Islanders in this one. Then we got the Canadiens and the Penguins. And so with this one, I don't think it's been confirmed yet, but Max Domi could be sitting out. You're looking at a goaltending battle between Carey Price and either Tristan Jarry or Matt Murray. I'm not sure how the Penguins are going to do with that. But nonetheless, I mean, you look at the firepower returning for Pittsburgh. Crosby, Malkin, Gensel. I think he's going to be healthy for this. And obviously he's capable of a lot. You look at the role that Brian Rust has played in a couple of those postseasons, and he had a fantastic season this year. Chris Letang, Brian Dumoulin, John Marino. I just like this team top to bottom. I don't think that they'll be denied in this playing round here. Whereas with Montreal, I mean, where's that scoring? Where's that firepower going to come from? Because when you compare players like Tomas Tatar or a Yoel Armia to a Sidney Crosby or Evgeny Malkin, it's really not close. So I'll take Pittsburgh in that one. This next one, I was watching Shannon's preview, and I think it's a tough one to call, actually. Jets and Flames. So with the Jets, they weren't really supposed to be here. They don't have the stars on defense, but somehow they got it done this year. I mean, of course, Connor Hellebuyck was playing out of his mind, so that's definitely a huge factor there. Calgary, I picked them to go to the finals this year. They've got an interesting makeup to them. They were actually pretty inconsistent from what I remember this year, or at least they didn't have the same season they did this past season, or they did in 2018-19. In terms of forwards, I think that's almost a push. You could probably give it to the Jets for their first line. I don't know. I think it's pretty even. Defensively, you want to give that edge to Calgary, but Travis Hamonick's going to be out, so that's a bit of a factor. They do have Eric Gustafsson on the blue line now to add some offense, but can they play enough solid defense for, Cam Talbot or for David Riddick? And that's the thing, you don't even know who's going to play. Talbot was the better goaltender if you look at the numbers. So Winnipeg, I think they have things figured out better than Calgary does. Although, of course, this break, kills all momentum and whatnot. I know I watched Shannon's preview, but I still kind of want to go with the Jets on this one, just because of really good goaltending they have, and I don't think that they're going to be, lacking any scoring going up against Calgary's defense. So I'm going to pick the Jets. Coyotes and Predators. Arizona, not the best at scoring. Their points leader was Nick Schmaltz. Phil Kessel had a down year, to say the least. But of course, in terms of defense and goaltending, this team is very good. Nashville is coming in with John Hines as their head coach. And Roman Josi had an amazing season. But that's the thing. When your defenseman is your leading scorer, to some people that's going to raise a red flag. But if I'm correct, he had way more points than the next guy. So that forward core, I know that they're deep. I like, their transition-oriented game. When you're going up against Arizona's goaltending, I don't think it matters who they trot out there. Whoever they have in net is more than likely going to outplay Saros or Rene, I think. I'll take Darcy Kemper, who's almost a Vezina caliber goaltender this year. So I actually think that this is kind of a little upset. I actually think the Coyotes can win this one. Now we've got the Blue Jackets and the Maple Leafs. The John Tortorellas are back in action, man. They rolled the dice last year, trying to get a couple players, and that did not, or that worked a little bit, but now they've lost all those players, and they don't have Bobrovsky, but they have this guy named Elvis, and he played pretty darn well for them. Was the reason why they got into the playoffs there. You also look at their defensive core as well. Very strong. You look at Seth Jones, Zach Werenski, Ryan Murray. Toronto, their strengths are mostly probably in their top six. You got Morgan Riley on the back end. You got Freddie Anderson in net. But kind of like what I said with the Blackhawks and the Oilers, it's Sheldon Keefe, who has won a Calder Cup, going up against John Tortorella. When I think about Torts and how that team responded after they were down in Game 1 against Tampa, they were down 3-0, and they just dominated Tampa after that. It's kind of hard not to want to go with Columbus in this one. The Leafs never have enough back-end support for Freddie Anderson. They haven't been able to close it out. And Columbus is one of those teams that I think would just, take advantage of that, frankly. So I'm going to pick the Jackets. And then Minnesota against Vancouver. So I talked about Minnesota in my most recent video. And they got here because they actually were able to turn things around from a scoring standpoint. And they have a very good defensive core. Very nice top four. Actually, you know what? Top six. They do a pretty good job in all three pairs with Carson Soucy there on the third pair. And as for Vancouver, they've got arguably, the Calder Trophy winner this year, or at least a finalist in Quinn Hughes. JT Miller had a great year, of course, playing with Pettersson. But at the end of the day, I still got to I got to tip the cap to the Canucks, because even though Stalock has had a very nice season, they're still kind of, I think they're still going to be sort of finding themselves out there. They're going on just 12 games with head coach Dean Evison, and the Canucks, they got this guy named Jacob Markstrom, and I think he's been a fantastic goaltender the last 3 years, and I think he's the kind of guy who can take a team on a deep run by himself. So I'll take the Vancouver Canucks there. So there you go. So recapping all 8 of those matchups, I like the Hurricanes over the Rangers. I like the Oilers over the Blackhawks. I've got the Islanders over the Panthers, the Penguins over the Canadiens. I'll take the Jets over the Flames. I'll take the Yotes over the Preds. I'll take the Blue Jackets over the Leafs. And I'll take the Canucks over the Wild. So what are your predictions? Let me know in the comments, and let's continue the conversation down there. Now, one other viewer had asked me a question. What are some of the best hockey games that I've ever been to? I can't really remember all of them. I've been to, a good share of them, but I'll recap a few of them here. So as you guys know, I was at Game 7 against Vegas last year for the Sharks. I've made a video about the 10 best sporting moments I've seen in person throughout my life. That was number 2, because I was in Minnesota for something called the Minneapolis Miracle. But yeah, that Game 7 against Vegas, I just remember the Sharks were just putting on shots after shots after shots, but it was their power play that was crappy. I'm talking about before the 5-minute major, of course. I was like, well, yeah, well, the Sharks are putting shots on net, but they're not, taking advantage of their best opportunities. Vegas comes down, they shoot once, they score. It's like, yeah, we've seen this happen all season long, right? And so it's 3-0. God dang, I cannot believe it. It was 3-0 at one point. And I've accepted defeat, and I have to watch, the rest of the third period. There's about, I don't know when they scored that third goal, but I think that was in the third period. So I've accepted defeat. I've said, all right, but I got to stay in my seat. I got to cheer my team on. Then the penalty happens, and I was really tuned out. Some people were booing. I was kind of tuned out of it. I was like, all right, so Pavelski's injured. What else could go wrong? This sucks. Yeah, maybe we'll score a goal on a 2-minute power play or something like that. Then the ref says, 5-minute major. And I know we can talk about that all we want. But the thing is that having been at that game, I really didn't know what had happened in that moment until I watched the replay later on. So I knew it was a 5-minute power play. And I said, I didn't want to get my hopes up, though, because the team had a few other power plays during the game and did a terrible job. So what happens? Logan Couture scores 6 seconds into that power play. 6 seconds to make it 3-1. It's a 2-goal game with 10:41 left. And the building goes loud, definitely. They don't blow the roof off just yet. And I think to myself, oh my God, they could actually do this, but I'm going to stay composed here because, Vegas could they could get a shorthanded goal. They could score 2 shorthanded goals on this kill. I know the Sharks against Vegas. It's not a good matchup for us. And then I think like a minute and a half later or something like that, Tomas Hertl tips in a shot pass from Carlson. That's when things start to go a little ballistic here. And I think that there was probably enough time still remaining in that power play and in the game where I thought, oh my God, they're going to do this. They're going to tie this thing up. Another 2 minutes passes or something like that. And Couture scores again. We're losing it at this point. We are losing it in the stands. This team that was so dead in the water is now just one more goal away from actually being in the lead and having a chance to win the series. Remember, they were down 3-1. Remember, in Game 6, they surrendered 58 shots or 59 shots and won it in, I think, double overtime on a shorthanded goal from Hertl. I mean, this team had seemingly already done the impossible, just getting to this point. And pretty shortly later, I think it was maybe 30 seconds later, Kevin LeBanc, instead of doing one of his back passes, sometimes that makes me cringe or like swear at my TV, he puts another one by Fleury. And how did this team have 4 goals in that power play? That's only been done like one other time, or at least in the playoffs. Afterwards, I said, okay, back to reality here, because guess what, guys? We're going up against Vegas. This team has our number. They're going to find a way to score another goal on us. And it happened later than I expected it to. But sure enough, with like a minute left, Jonathan Marchessault tucks one in under Jones' glove arm, or just over it. And I thought to myself, okay, so now we're going to get a taste of reality in overtime. But I was surprised. It must have been from the penalty kill, because Vegas was playing on their heels. The Sharks were still attacking. And they didn't let that last goal get to them. They didn't let Vegas' 4th goal get to them. And then I'm at the same end of the arena where Barclay Goodrow scores that goal. I don't really remember so much about what happened right there. Although I did, I vlogged it. And I just screamed into my camera, "The night has been slain. The night has been slain. San Jose wins." Yeah, I mean, my friend who was with me, he's been a diehard for, probably 20-something years. And he said, "Nick, we're never going to see anything like that again." I don't know. I hope that we see something that's not the same moment, not the same type of outcome necessarily, but maybe it's a Stanley Cup win at some point. But holy moly, the energy in the building and walking out of the building. We just kind of walked around for a little bit inside the Shark Tank before actually exiting. And obviously people are high-fiving and just like, there are some people out there who are so excited they don't even know what to do with themselves. It's awesome. So that's still the best hockey game. That's still the best moment in hockey that I've seen in person. I also went to game 1 against Vegas, and I went to game 1 against St. Louis that same year. And I kind of put those down as two of the best ones I've ever seen, at least in playoff hockey. Just because the Sharks were actually really dominant in those games. When the Sharks won game 1 against St. Louis, I was like, this isn't close. This team is going to just cakewalk into the finals. And then game 3 happened. And the Sharks, I thought, were the better team in game 4. They were down 2-0 early on. And then they played lights out, I think, for the most part. They just couldn't find the net at the end. Could have been a different story if they went back to San Jose tied 2-2. Or, excuse me, up 3-1. But, yeah, those were still great games in terms of just, that confidence. Game 2 against LA in 2014. So, yep, that was the year of the reverse sweep. So the Sharks were up 1-0 in the series. I went to game 2. LA scores 2 goals, I think fairly early. I don't remember exactly how early into the game that was. They're up 2-0, and you're like, okay, we're done. Like, they're just skating circles around the Sharks. I don't know how the hell it happened, but the Sharks then scored 7 unanswered. And it was insane. It was a clinic. It was just this, onslaught against our South State rival. So yeah, that was another one of my favorite playoff games. And then 2 more. Game 2 against Detroit in 2011. That was super cool because the year before I spent the playoffs in Chicago. I was living there for a few months. And the Sharks beat the Red Wings in the second round then. And then they went up in the second round against them in 2011. And with this game, and like the LA one, I have to thank a family friend. So she is a season ticket holder. And her seats are 7 rows up from the ice. So yeah, she was like, hey, I got an extra ticket for the playoff game. She has like 6 seats. So it's great because she might have 5 filled. And then she's like, okay, well, I got 1 remaining. She's like, all right, well, I know who'll go no matter what. This 23-year-old kid who's living in San Jose. And it was so cool because I lived about, I guess 2.5 miles away. So that game was at noon. And I woke up and it was probably about, 8 or 9 in the morning or something like that. And so what I did was I walked to SAP Center from there. I stopped over on the Alameda at Cafe Rosalena. They got some bomb diggity breakfast burritos. I know everybody likes La Vic's. La Vic's has good breakfast burritos, but Rosalena I think is just as good, if not better. So got one of those. And it's noon, and here I am at the Shark Tank watching a playoff game, 7 rows up from the ice, or 8 rows up from the ice. And the Sharks won that one 2-0, so it was a very intense defensive battle there. So really like that one. The Sharks, made it 2-0 in that series. They almost got reverse swept then. They had to win at home in Game 7 against Detroit. But it was cool. Just walking there and walking back in my jersey, middle of the day. It was cool. The other really great playoff game I went to was in 2006 against Edmonton in the second round. And that was when the Sharks were killing a 5-on-3. And then like a minute into the kill, because they had to kill that 5-on-3 for almost 2 minutes, I think. And one guy, I forgot who it was, broke his stick. And then the other guy lost his stick or broke it as well. So literally we have 2 defenders out there, 3 penalty killers, who can't get a clear this whole time, I think. And only one of them has his stick. And it's crazy because they're like laying out to prevent shots, disrupting the passing lanes. Chris Pronger's out there for part of it, and everybody's booing the shit out of Chris Pronger. And the Sharks killed that off. I think the Oilers would score not too long after, but I think it was back to even strength then. I just remember how loud that arena was, though. And certainly it's among one of the more unique moments in playoff history for the Sharks there. So yeah, that's my history with that. And then what would I do if the Sharks won a cup? What would that be like? Well, my friends, well, they are the dearest team to me. They haven't always been the first to my heart. For a while there it was the Giants, the San Francisco Giants. When they won in 2010, that was the first time one of my favorite professional sports teams won a title, for when I was actually rooting for them. And that 2010 run the Giants went on was clearly magical. They weren't in the playoffs going into September. They overcame like a 5.5 game division or gap in the division to win the division. I went to game 1 of the World Series. And this whole time I was, cheering them on with my dad. My dad grew up a lifelong Giants fan. And so to be able to see them win that World Series, we were at home for that one. And in fact, I drove from where I was working at the time in Fremont. I got out of work early. I drove down to my parents' house, 90 minutes away, because I called my mom earlier that day or the day before. I said, do you think the Giants are going to win Game 5? And she said, yeah, I think they are. I think that this is the one. They're going to do it. So I drove down. I think I actually surprised my dad. I think I got there in like the 3rd inning. But I watched that with my parents there. And on the final out in the bottom of the 9th inning, I remember my dad doing this. He was like a kid. He went back to being a kid in the 1960s or late 50s, in the days of Mays and Willie McCovey and Juan Marshall and Orlando Cepeda and whatnot. And so he stands up. I think we're already standing up in front of the TV. And he says, hey, grab my hand. So I think I've got my hand. I've got one of my hands holding him, and I've got my other hand holding my mom's hand. And I just remember Brian Wilson strikes out the last batter. I don't know if it was Beltray or Josh Hamilton. Maybe it was Beltray. I don't remember. But I just remember, I think the first thing I did was I jumped up and I bear hugged my dad as tightly as I probably ever have. I don't know. The elation it certainly was there. It wasn't like I was on my knees sobbing, because even though I'm certainly a Giants fan, I had only been really hardcore into them since like 02 or 03. So that was about, that was less than a decade as a real Giants fan. Now going back to the Sharks, we're talking about something that dates back to my childhood. The mid-1990s, going to my first few games there for some of those years, but I didn't care. I was there to see Sharky and watch fights. And then in high school, being sort of converted into a diehard by my other friends. Going to college, 5 minutes away from the Shark Tank. Starting to go to more games, thanks to my family friend. I even made videos back in like 2009, around that time. I made a few videos on YouTube as well. Cheering the Sharks on in Chicago. Experiencing heartbreak. 2009 against the Ducks in the first round. 2008 in 4 overtimes against the Dallas Stars. 2011, the weirdest conference finals clinching goal scored by Bieksa, I think, actually scored that goal. Yeah, I think of those. I think of the reverse sweep against the Kings. I think of 2016 against the Penguins. I think of Vegas beating us in their first year in the NHL. I think of all the hate the Sharks got because the refs made a few bad calls. Even though you look at like some of the neon knee hits that the Sharks took that were not called. I look at all that. I look at painting my face for playoff games and converting lots and lots of my friends to Sharks fans. Or when people saw me, even if they weren't sports fans, they'd be like, hey, how are the Sharks doing? Or, hey, I heard about the Sharks. Were you there for that? So you know what it was like for me as a Giants fan. It was special because I was a fan of the team, but it was something that was really tied to my relationship with my dad and even my mom as well. Here, it's more about how the Sharks are one of the reasons why I've always been here, why I went to college here, why I stayed here when I afterwards, or when I got back from Chicago. That they're one of those reasons. I said it in college. I said, I want to be a season ticket holder one day. And I've been a half-season ticket holder for 2 seasons. So that's almost like being a season ticket holder for 1 year, right? I think about just how much a part of my life this team has been. I'd say really for the last 14 years since the lockout, the '05 lockout. I would imagine that should the team win, well, I don't know if I'll be there. I sure as hell hope I am. I don't care how much I have to pay for tickets or whatever. That's one of those ones where you'll hug anybody in your vicinity, even if you've never seen them before. I don't know if sports like that have ever made me cry. I don't think I've even ever cried when my team has lost. I can't imagine a situation in which the Sharks win a Stanley Cup and I don't cry. And I'm not talking about like a single tear. I'm talking about, if I'm watching it with somebody, which I hope I am, I'm going to be hugging that person. My face is going to be buried in their shoulder. It's probably going to look like I was raiding a Kleenex box. For the city of San Jose, I'm going to be honest. I think it's due to the fact that there are a lot of transplants there. It's not a sports town by any means. So it's not like when the Hawks won a Stanley Cup. It's not like when the Kansas City Chiefs won a Super Bowl. That sort of Super Bowl, that sort of celebration, that level of celebration, I don't see that in San Jose so much. Even when the team was in the Stanley Cup Finals, I'll be honest, the city did a pretty crappy job of actually generating hype around them. Either that or they just weren't getting any response from the locals. Not much. To those out there who have been there since day one, who are San Joseans, not Bay Area residents so much, but who are San Joseans, people who lived there in San Jose or in the South Bay, who know it's not the same as San Francisco. It's not quite the same as Oakland. It's its own city. It's its own vibe. It's the one that's not really talked about so much. And you know what? Maybe we kind of prefer it that way because that helps us kind of keep our identity. That'll be the spirit that's captured by a Stanley Cup like that. Yeah, I'd go to a parade, buy all the merchandise. Look, I've seen the Giants win 3 championships for baseball. My Vikings, though, haven't won a Super Bowl. I would just be a really happy person in my lifetime if I knew the Sharks would win a Stanley Cup and the Vikings would win a Super Bowl. Other than that, I don't know. As long as Vegas doesn't win that many cups, as long as the Packers don't win that many more Super Bowls in my lifetime, I'll be pretty happy if my teams at least get one. Because you can always hold on to that, Even when the team sucks, you're like, hey, you know what? That makes me appreciate what this team once was. And especially for the Sharks. I mean, come on. They've been on the doorstep so many times. Just get one, guys. It's gonna suck that we're not gonna have one with Joe Thornton or Patrick Marleau. I just hope that Couture's still around for that. I hope Hurdle's around. Ideally, Vlasic and Burns as well. But ultimately, it doesn't matter who's wearing the uniform, right? It's the logo. It's the arena. It's the fans. It's my friends. I'm not BSing. I'm not embellishing. Like when I think about what I want to happen in my life, kind of my life's bucket list, really. I've had a good life, no doubt. It's like, all right, well, I want to make a life for myself with, this channel and with content creation in general, to be able to work for myself, kind of see that through as sort of the pinnacle of my, I don't want to say career, but that's kind of what I mean. I want that. I want Cortana, my dog, to have the longest, most fruitful life possible, and to be there for every moment of that, and to treat her like a furry little princess, and to do that for other animals too. Those are 2 things right there. I want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl, the Sharks to win a Stanley Cup, and of course see other parts of the world that I haven't already. So I don't know. That's kind of like a top 5 for me. Hopefully one day I'm still around. Hopefully I still have some energy about me, and this team can finally realize its potential And yeah, I think that's going to do it for that. Anyway, guys, I think that's going to do it for this podcast. Before I sign off officially, just a little bit of house cleaning. So, as I've mentioned earlier, I'm working on the logo. So, I'll actually be looking to put out a video that kind of talks about how I came up with the idea for it and how I worked with the designer for that. At some point in the next 2 weeks, Cortana will be giving her play-in round predictions, and I will continue making videos on 5 reasons why each playoff team can win the Stanley Cup. If you have any suggestions for how I can make these podcasts a little livelier, kind of like how I brought on Matt, the AZ Sports guy last time, just let me know down in the comments below. Let me know if there are any topics you'd like for me to cover. Share this podcast with your other hockey fans out there. Click the thumbs up if you enjoyed this. Subscribe if you haven't already. And thanks so much for listening to another Twistcast. I will talk to you guys again real soon.